take off my shoes.
Yes,
ready?
Come on, let's do it.
So this is my first time in this capacity talking about health and wellness. So I'm truly grateful for the opportunity. All right, so here we go. First thing we're gonna warm. You understand? You have to warm. The microphone is on me. I can't move.
Can't jump too much.
All right, so never you do nothing without warming up the muscles.
very
And after you warm, you're gonna have to stretch. All right, you're gonna have to stretch. Stretch your hamstrings. Yes. Then just a little in the front.
Just a little,
Not too far. Especially your All right, a little twist the waistline, warm up the back. Very, very important to warm because that prevents injuries.
You know, I'm going to host a sports day or something. Me warm.
You clean the side, we do it. Yeah.
Oh, those beautiful stretches.
was nice.
Yes.
No stretching is designed for you to feel good and vibe you up to get into the exercise.
Tune in to Lead Story, weekdays at 6 p.m. Hosted by Jolyan Quarry.
Brought to you by
Horizon, a new loan product from Access Financial Services. Tonight, a Jamaican court delivers its verdict in one of the most closely watched domestic homicide cases that this nation has seen in years. Jolyan Silvera, convicted, sentenced, 20 years and 10 months overall. But does that mean the punishment fits the crime? And what does this ruling say about how Jamaica treats the killing of women by the men who claim to love them? Then, an era ends. For nearly 50 years, Cuban doctors have been the backbone of Jamaica's public health system. Tonight, the government confirms the end of state medical cooperation agreement with Havana is over. But the question is not simply who replaces them. The question is what happens to the doctors who choose to stay. And amid the weight of this week's news, we close with something this nation is quietly deliberating: building peace. 1,010 schools, one generation, one mandate. I'm Jolyan Quarry, and this is Lead Story. This afternoon, Chief Justice Brian Sykes handed down his sentencing decision in the case of the Crown versus Jolyan Silvera. Crown and Jolyan Silvera. And this nation has been watching this matter. Silvera was convicted on 2 counts: the manslaughter of his wife, Melissa Silvera, and the illegal possession of a firearm. The conviction on the manslaughter charge came by way of a guilty plea, a decision that foreclosed a murder trial, and with it, the possibility of a mandatory life sentence. Chief Justice Sykes imposed 20 years for the firearms offense and 20 years and 10 months for the manslaughter. Both sentences are to run concurrently, meaning Jolyan Silvera will serve an effective term of 20 years and 10 months. The charges, the conviction, and the sentence, the critical legal architecture that governs what happens next. We'll be having that full conversation inside Lead Story right now with Senior Defense Attorney at Law, who has continued to join us to give us information on this case, Lloyd McFarlane. Lloyd McFarlane, thanks so much for joining us.
Nice to be here, Jolyan.
You've been generous with your time, as we have gone through the Silvera case, the nation has been watching this, trying to figure out what it is that's going on. And the last time you spoke to us, you said Jamaica is a manslaughter case. The plea was for manslaughter. He's going to be convicted for manslaughter. You're not looking at a conviction for murder. But Jamaicans today sat and watched as Chief Justice Brian Sykes, over 2 hours of sentencing remarks, broke down what it is that led to him now giving 20 years and 10 months for one count, 20 years for another. What are your thoughts on what we saw today?
Well, first of all, in your introduction, you said that he was convicted for unlawful possession of a firearm.
Because it was a legal firearm, no. So the correction for that. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, he was convicted in relation to using a firearm to commit a felony.
Yes.
That charge was necessary in order to get it under the gun court's jurisdiction. Usually, they would have the illegal possession to get these matters under the gun court jurisdiction, but not in this case, as he was a licensed firearm holder. The interesting thing about that charge is that only when I was watching the sentencing today was I made aware that there were 2 counts that he had pleaded to. The whole of the emphasis was on the manslaughter.
Yes.
And in a sense, this was also unfair to the prosecution in terms of how they went about this. Because at all times, they had this count, which carried a mandatory 20-year sentence. So they weren't really giving up much. It was an astute move on their part, and of course, the defense didn't have a choice, because ordinarily, when we have 2 counts on any indictment, we would say to the prosecution, why don't you drop one? Especially because the sentences are going to run concurrently. Here in this particular case, the prosecution could say, we can't drop it because this is the count that grounds the gun court jurisdiction. Now, in terms of what happened today, it was interesting because the members of the public would have been fascinated to learn how this whole thing unfolds, what the considerations are. It would not be so fascinating for me since I usually am the one making the arguments. However, it was still very interesting to me because this was setting a precedent for the courts in this type of matter.
That's important because Chief Justice Brian Sykes, sat in front of the nation and explained all of this. You said it was interesting to the public. Some of them said they weren't so interesting. After 2 hours of sentencing remarks, they're like, is this what court really is like? Is that important for people to have actually seen that process? Before we go about the precedent and the like, is it important for them to have seen the process, seen what it looks like, that it is not like Law and Order, that it is not like exciting court dramas, that this is what the process of justice looks like, and the deliberation that you saw in the Chief Justice today with his very particular style in going through every single thing. Today could have been a lecture for all the detail that he went into. Is that important as we talk about the various parts now to this case, that all of Jamaica is on the same page with regard to what happened in the sentencing?
Yeah, it was very important for the public to be taken through all of the steps. And the Chief Justice has to be given full marks for making sure that all factors to be considered were dealt with, and that the public, whoever they were, could be under no doubt that this sentence was in fact a justified sentence. In terms of how he laid it out, yes, I have heard persons speak about hearing the Chief Justice and how it is a very dull process. I have not found it dull, but I can understand.
And I think the lawyers were having a good time today, and the general public was like, oh my gosh, is this so long?
I have news for them. There are judges who are even worse.
And so that appreciation then of the justice system, especially if people haven't come into it, we already have a problem getting jurors into our court, so many people would not have had a sort of contact with the justice system in this way to be able to see what happens, especially if you're not the one sitting there sweating and awaiting a verdict. That would be important. But you also spoke about the precedent that
yes.
the Chief Justice was setting. He made reference in his three-part statement today. He went through the first part, all the information that was before then, the second part, the law, the third part, how the sentence would be arrived at. In that second part, he said, Jamaica, we just don't have a lot of anything about how we deal with now a firearm being involved in a manslaughter matter, having to then go to jurisdictions like Trinidad and Tobago, referencing the Cayman Islands, in order to help us. Why was that important?
It is true that it is unusual to have a manslaughter case coming out of a shooting, although it can happen because provocation can occur with any type of offensive weapon, not just knives. The problem here, and why it was of interest to lawyers, was that the Firearms Act that was being used to ground all of this has been amended very recently. And what the government has done is it has upped the sentences on just about everything and made life a little harder, even for defense lawyers, to get pleas. What is the effect of this when you go in as a lawyer now with another client in a year's time? And when you have to advise a client, should you take a plea or not take a plea, etc., what is going to be the end result of the sentence? We saw today what it is. The Chief Justice has set the precedent of saying, when you have a gun crime, expect a stronger sentence because Parliament has sent a message with their increased or enhanced sentencing that this is what is going to happen. So that even though we have a lot of framework, ranges and sentences in the sentencing guidelines, unfortunately, a lot of these will not hold any longer because of the new situation in relation to gun offenses. All of those guidelines are going to go up. And this is why it was of great interest to us as lawyers, because now we have to say, okay, so where will it really be? This is the first case with the new Firearms Act that is setting a precedent on sentencing that moves manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, to a slightly higher rung. So even though there are Jamaicans who are expressing dissatisfaction at the sentence, I have news for them. If it was before the new act was passed, the range would have been less, because the Chief Justice has to act in accordance with the law and precedent.
When you say less, are we talking the range of something like 5 to 15 years?
Listen, the last manslaughter matter that I did, unfortunate case, I won't call the names or anything, but the judge went through everything thoroughly. I did a very thorough job in terms of everything, called in my witnesses and so on. And at the end of the day, the judge sentenced that person to 5 years. In fact, he had served the 5 years, so it was time served. Interestingly, the prosecutor made submissions to the judge agreeing with my recommendation for 5 years, using precedents, etc.
So it's important then that Jamaicans understand that you could have been looking at something far less if we had been now without this new change to the Firearm Act that would have now led us to this place, manslaughter. The Chief Justice said today was voluntary, not involuntary. That is, he did say he intended, or not intended, but he knew that he had the gun. He didn't just push her and, oh, she fell and she died. He knew that he had the gun. He knew that he was the one that shot her. But provocation now moved that from it being murder to now being manslaughter, and allowing for this conversation to then ensue. After the break, though, we're going to take a look at what actually happened today, because the Chief Justice talked a lot about details, things that got Jamaicans up in arms. And Lloyd McFarlane, as you've helped us understand what this 20-year sentence and 20-year and 10-month sentence, both to run concurrently, now mean, we have to look at what it is that the Chief Justice said that will help us, especially persons now looking at what provocation sits as in Jamaican law, protection of women, and all that it means, later inside the show. Stay with us here inside Lead Story.
We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yeah.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
Hi, I am Kendi Pang.
Watagwan. Watagwan.
Watagwan. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
Jamaica's unemployment rate has fallen to 3.3%, down from 13.2% in 2016. Our government's continued focus on job creation is delivering real results. We are building Jamaica. The Time by the
Before the break, we examined the legal architecture of today's sentencing decision. Now, we turn to the prosecutorial dimension, because the outcome of this case was shaped in significant part by a decision made before Chief Justice Sykes even entered the courtroom properly, a decision to accept a manslaughter plea. That decision and what it means for public confidence in Jamaica's justice system is at the heart of this next conversation. We continue to be joined here by a senior defense attorney Lloyd McFarlane as we talk about some of the things coming out of the sentencing remarks from Chief Justice Brian Sykes today as he sat before the nation and told us what it is that we should expect. Now, it was a long process. People not accustomed to sitting down for 2 hours and hearing judges speak would have had a rough time today. But let's go through some of what the Chief Justice said, because he did, as I said earlier, speak in 3 parts. First part, talking about what was said, talking about what the provoking words were. And in context, he shared that Jolyan Silvera had said not only what we saw from the statement from the Director of Public Prosecutions in February, these broad statements about speaking about his mother and his children and his sister, but today categorized what those statements are, indicating that they were fairly offensive statements that had been made, intimating an incestuous relationship between himself and his sister, saying that his mother was getting in the way of their life, and then accusing him of not only throwing their child in the pool, but then saying, you can just go ahead and throw the other 2 in the pool as well. Provoking words, provoking language. That's what was raised today. But the concern by advocates is that you only hear one side of the story. You don't hear what language he used to provoke her, to drive and incense her in this conversation. Provocation then is at the heart of this. Is Jamaica past the point where provocation should be allowed to be a reason that, as advocates for the Melissa Silvera protest a few days ago, you can have a mouth versus a gun and the gun can win?
Provocation, remember, is a common law partial defense. It didn't come with us. It came all the way from England, Privy Council, etc. And is settled law not only in England and Jamaica, but all over the world.
New Zealand has removed it. New Zealand has said that provocation no longer has a space in modern law, indicating that where you have this sort of use of words or provocative language and actions, that is not enough to then constitute a partial defense. So at least there is some movement. Australia is looking at it. There's a discussion as well as to whether modern life requires it. It's settled here, though. But in a case like this, where you only hear half the story, where the other person can't defend themselves, does it make it more difficult for the public to accept it?
Remember that in the end, it would have been for the jury to decide whether they were going to accept Silvera's description of what happened. The problem that the prosecution had was that even if the jury would have said, look, this man has tried to cover up everything from day one, why would I believe him when he says that he was provoked? The problem that the prosecution had was twofold. One, it had nothing in terms of evidence to rebut what Jolyan Silvera said. I put it another way. There are many times that you will get a case where nobody saw what happened, person is stabbed or whatever it is, and the police take their statements, and the person charged says, but I was acting in self-defense. If nobody else saw, he can never be convicted unless you can show by forensic or other evidence that his description of what happened could not be. Now, all of the ballistic and forensic evidence that the prosecution had was merely to show that Jolyan Silvera was likely the one who killed her. They have nothing to rebut the circumstances he put forward in terms of that. And worse for them, as a prosecution, they had friends of hers who supported the position that she's a certain type of person.
And let me talk about that, because I made extensive notes today as the Chief Justice was speaking. He made reference or information from the prosecution from two friends. Friend number one said that Melissa Silvera would be, there'd be tracing in arguments. They called it making up noise. But then they said she would push her point, indicating, though, overall she was a loving mother to her children. A second friend, information that the prosecution had shared by the Chief Justice in his remarks today, said that Melissa Silvera was mouthy, that is, feisty and strong-willed woman who was very smart. Feisty is how the Chief Justice pronounced it. Jamaicans would know this as feisty. For many people, they took serious umbrage, not only to these two statements that had been shared by the Chief Justice, but further on, Jolyan Silvera in his social inquiry report, or rather in his report when he was in lockup, saying, I thought she had a mental illness. I suggested that it might have been, and he used one name, bipolar disorder, that they had not gone to any counseling, and that this was a long-standing feud. All of those things then characterizes a woman who is unable to speak for herself. Even if the friends then say this, should this have been enough to then characterize her as someone who was this kind of person?
You have to understand, the issue is not how she was characterized as such. Because it doesn't mean that a jury would believe that because of her behavior, this was sufficient provocation. It doesn't mean that. The importance of it was that the prosecution, seeing its situation, had to recognize that really it was up the creek without a paddle here once he put forward the provocation. So when the prosecution agreed to manslaughter, it was in a situation where they knew that even if they'd gone to trial, since his defense amounted to manslaughter, they were hardly going to do any better. And I have done cases where judges have got, many years ago, very upset at the prosecution for wasting the court's time putting forward something which they knew could not succeed. And I agree with that. The pressures on our court system are a lot. And where the prosecution comes to a conclusion that really it's not sure that they will do better than manslaughter, it did the right thing.
Let's go through some information then that had been in the public domain that was then raised by Chief Justice Brian Sykes, not only in his first part talking about the information before him, but as he was making sentencing determinations and then speaking about aggravating and mitigating factors as he was making then the final determination for what sentencing was going to be. All right. He talked about Jolyan Silvera leaving the house and the children after the shooting her in her upper thigh on the right, shooting her in her abdomen, upper thigh on the left, shooting her in abdomen, upper thigh on the right, shooting her in abdomen on the left, shooting her in the abdomen on the right. 3 shots in this lower area. He left the house and the body and left the children at home to discover the body of the mother. They said that. Ballistic testing done. He then knew that he had shot Melissa Silvera and still asked for additional ballistic testing to go ahead and say, it might not have been me. The officer on the scene, the Chief Justice said in his first section, had told him, Silvera, not to alter the bedroom. Information in the public domain suggests that a complete alteration of the bedroom had been done. These are all things that had been raised by the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice going through what it is that the Crown had put there as aggravating factors, saying he would have known what happened. He was before the court since January of 2024, so you could have said from then, oops, sorry, I'm the one that did it. And he shouldn't benefit, they said, from the guilty plea for the fullest extent because he took so long to say anything. With all of that there, people were expecting more. They were expecting that they understood these deliberate actions as something that should have made the court go higher, 30, 40, 50 even. Why not?
Well, don't forget that he could have been charged with trying to cover up the thing.
And there are also concerns that other people might have been involved in this that also should have been tagged as accessories after the fact, assisting him, for example, in that. And that has incensed some people, saying a full trial, even if it would have led to manslaughter, would have identified those persons as well.
What the public must understand, though, is that when the Chief Justice went through all of those, what he was saying very clearly is that I take these into consideration in adding to the sentence, because that is what we mean by aggravating factors. So the Chief Justice went through all of them to say, I have not ignored any of these things. The prosecution has put this forward, and they have counted against him. His coldness, etc., have all been counted, and that is why I started at 25 or wherever it is. So the fact that Silvera did these things, you must not get the impression that he got away with it. And in the end, when it came to the discounted amount, remember, what the law said was that if he had done so from the first relevant date, in other words, the very first opportunity, soon as he got full disclosure.
As soon as he was made aware, which would have been in January 2024, yes. He had said, after he's now charged fully, he had said, you know what, oh my goodness, I'm the one that did it. Mm-hmm. He would have got what?
Much better.
50%?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You remember what the Act says is up to. Yeah, 50%. Nobody's getting 50% in these things, but it's up to. In other words, it would have probably been more than 35. And that is a very important thing when you're the one sitting in.
50% of the total sentence up to that would have been able to be taken off by the court, understanding that he has not wasted the court's time. And so in order to incentivize people in order to allow them to make that first opportunity count, you say, here's the benefit that you get.
It is a very important motivation for persons, because what had originally happened was that when the Bruce Golden government put in amendments that had these 15-year minimums for certain gun offenses and so on, it was a difficult situation because nobody was going to plead. And lawyers could not get anybody to plead because it was not in their interest. It is at that time that the Parliament put in that provision that said that if the person pleads guilty in relation to an offense that carries a mandatory minimum, the judge can disregard the mandatory minimum in reducing the sentence. It is that aspect of the Chief Justice's summation today that bothers me. I do not think that counsel, whoever was handling the matter, brought to his attention this section that is not repealed, and it's the same law that he read from in terms of the 50% and 35%, etc. It is right there.
So it could have been lower?
Of course it could.
All right, quickly before we go, as we end this conversation here, one, we had the Chief Justice go through with a starting point of 25 years, then aggravating factors, he had +6, mitigating factors, -4, that took us down to 27. Then he was in the reduction for 4 years, because of the discount that he received, not quite 35%, but the Chief Justice said 4 years off. That takes us down to 23. He was in custody for 2 years and 2 months, so it took us down now to 21, and then we took out the 2 months, so we said 20 years and 10 months. That's how we get that final figure.
Yes. Remember, in some aspects, like in the amount to be credited for time spent on remand, that is just the law.
Right, so it's nothing that he could have sat down and done
Some judges
anything.
count it right down to the day.
There you go.
Yes.
So The parole minimum time, though, is 13 years. For many people, they feel then that it's not even a 20-year sentence he gets out with the possibility of parole. Good behavior at 13, making it even shorter for them. What do you say to those people?
Well, here's the thing. If it was a situation of life imprisonment, in the murder or the manslaughter situation, of course the judge would be bound to say, and he cannot come out until at least so much the minimum has passed. The statutes actually say how much. In the new firearms situation with the use of a gun to commit a felony, it says what the minimum is for parole.
Which is 13?
It says there's a minimum sentence of 20, a maximum of no more than 25, and you are eligible for parole, but not before 10 years has passed.
So that's why the 13 had been said. The Chief Justice saying that there will be no incentive for you to behave yourself. Finally, are we expecting an appeal? Either from the prosecution that now has the right to appeal, or from the defense looking at this and said we could have done better?
The prosecution would have no justification for appeal, none whatsoever. And it's a matter for his defense lawyers. I have no comment on that part.
All right, so right now we're not seeing then immediately where they'd be going for appeal. Some cases you come out and you go absolutely going to appeal. This doesn't strike you as
No. The prosecution is only allowed to appeal sentences where the sentence is clearly bad. This is not a situation like that.
There you go. Well, we've been continuing to watch Jolyan Silvera case. You had full live coverage today on CVM. We've now gone through with Senior Defense Attorney Lloyd McFarlane inside the show talking about what it means. We've also invited the Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions who was in charge of this case, Dwayne Green. Unfortunately, he was unable to join us today. But that's it. We're having more discussions after the break here inside Lead Story.
Make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is 6.
Every dream conquered is another dream game. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction. 'Cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music is to play, and the people them I say we are my show tonight. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got the spark, don't be the dark. Shine your lights
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Thanks so much for staying with us inside Lead Story. For nearly 50 years, Cuban doctors have been the backbone of Jamaica's public health system, from rural clinics to specialized eye surgery centers. But tonight, that era has come to a stark and sudden crossroads. Yesterday, the government of Jamaica announced it would discontinue the state-to-state technical cooperation program with Havana, citing a failure to reach new terms. Cuba has responded bitterly, accusing Kingston today of bowing to Washington's pressure and signaling the immediate withdrawal of its 277-member medical brigade. At the heart of this diplomatic schism is the 2025 U.S. Trafficking in Persons report, with Jamaica desperate to avoid a Tier 2 watch list classification, which carries severe diplomatic and financial consequences. The ethical and legal status of Cuban missions is therefore no longer just a health issue. It's a human rights minefield. We're joined today by Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, to talk about the decision and the impact it is likely to have on Jamaica's healthcare system. Dr. Tufton, thank you so very much for joining us this evening inside Lead Story.
Thank you very much.
Minister, Jamaicans have been benefiting from the Cuban programs for the last 50 years, and many of them were shocked and surprised that they were no longer going to be able to have Cuban doctors here on the ground in the way that they had been accustomed to. What was a sticking point in the discussions with Havana that have now led to us after 2023, 3 years of negotiating to 2026, no longer able to keep them in the same way?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to make a distinction between a technical agreement and the desire to have the Cubans here and the value that they have played in terms of our health system for Jamaicans over those many years. We value their contribution, we value the friendship, and we would certainly like to see it continue. The sticking point is really an issue of the terms of the agreement. And the initial agreement will expire some years ago, as you have said in your preface run-up. We have been trying to discuss to agree on a new set of terms, and we were unable to. And that is what led to a decision to not pursue any longer after a few years another MOU and rather give an opportunity in recognition of the excellent contribution of the Cubans to individual contracts if they so desire. Now, it really is up to the Cubans to make a decision. Just as we have our sovereign right to make an offer, they have their sovereign right to refuse or to accept the offer. And of course, the soundings up to this point is suggesting that they may have an issue. So, you know, I'm hoping that the conversation is not a signal of any souring of the friendship, or certainly a recognition of the contribution of the program over time. And I certainly hope that we can find a way to make it work. In the meantime, of course, we have a responsibility to the people of Jamaica. I have a responsibility as Minister of Health to deal with the health systems, and we just have to develop some contingencies while we hopefully try to work this out.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs yesterday in its statement had indicated that we were now going to be reaching out to these doctors individually. The 277 that Cuba has now said are on the ground here. Has the Cuban government officially consented to their citizens being hired individually, or do they view this as a breach of their sovereign control over their medical personnel, especially after the statement today saying they're bringing them all back home?
Well, clearly the statement is self-evident that there is disapproval of the approach that we have pursued or have been intending to pursue. And again, that's their right. I mean, it's the right of the government to determine. It's the right of the Cubans who are here to determine. So this is not about forcing anyone to do anything. It really is an attempt at trying to find accommodation. It's part of the negotiations. And it's part of the offer that we have placed on the table. So I think it's important to respect the rights of Cuba and Cubans to determine what they want. And I hope that, you know, if what they want is returned, and if the Cubans here want to go back, we should allow them free, safe, and comfortable passage while we try to work out the challenges that we face.
We heard as well from the Minister of Foreign Affairs today that there was no pressure from the U.S. On this. However, Cuba in its statement says that that's not accurate, and the 2025 U.S. Trafficking in Persons report for Jamaica explicitly listed hiring Cuban workers directly as something that they called a prioritized recommendation to avoid a Tier 2 downgrade. Is it then appropriate for us to say that there was no influence? Because remarkably, we were doing yesterday exactly what it is that the U.S. said we were supposed to do in order to not be downgraded and have visa restrictions and the like.
Well, pressure is a technical term that one could interpret in different ways. I mean, the U.S. certainly has a right, as does Cuba and Jamaica, to express itself on what it sees as an issue. We live in a global community. The geopolitical considerations change from decade to decade. It's a very sensitive time now. And we have to listen to all concerned as we seek to protect the rights and the interests of our people. We have our own laws. Those laws should guide how we act. So, if I were to identify all the parameters, all the factors, I'd be prepared to say that you can't ignore the geopolitical considerations, but you also have to reconcile that with your own sovereignty, self-determination, how you integrate yourselves in the hemisphere, in the markets, how do you achieve the best protection for your people, and how you're viewed in the international community. So some of the renegotiation would have factored some of those considerations. And I don't know if it is pressure per se, or it is just a pragmatic, practical approach to achieving what you're seeking to achieve. And hence some of the changes that were proposed. But again, I say all of us have a right to self-determination, and our interest in Jamaica, my interest as Minister of Health, is to support our health systems in a way that supports the overarching development of our country. And I report to a cabinet which is of that mindset, of that view, led by our Prime Minister. And that's what we've sought to do.
All right, Minister, because you are then responsible for local health care, Cuba has called this a unilateral termination. They're calling back for their 277 people. But how will the ministry fill the void now, especially in specialized areas like ophthalmology and nephrology, where we depend heavily on Cuban staff?
Right. So in the immediate term, if in fact the Cubans return, as was articulated by the government of Cuba.
You say if, Minister. Why if?
Well, I've been consistent. I've said there's a choice that people need to make. The Cubans need to make a choice. The government has made a pronouncement. The two don't always reconcile. It depends. And I'm not suggesting anything, but I'm saying people can choose what they want to do, as whether they support that call or they don't. And I'm saying it without any sort of motive or intention.
Not motive, Minister, but in Havana, in Cuba, there are laws that say if someone deserts the medical mission, they are called labeled effectively a deserter. They can't go back to Cuba for 8 years. Their family's property and their property gets taken away. This is heavy. When you're saying if, as opposed to sending them back, are we offering them permanent residency or Jamaican citizenship for them to stay, if we're going to say if as opposed to when?
Well, firstly, I have absolutely no power or authority to even be pretentious or presumptive about what any decision and any follow-up action will be. So please don't put too much weight on what I say. The fact is that if the Cubans return based on the call by their government, which is their right so to do, then we will have a challenge in the short term because of the value of the relationship and their contribution, and that is undeniable. And so we will have to come up with a contingency. In the immediate term, it will be difficult. In the medium term, it will be better, and in the not so medium term, it will hopefully restore some normality because of efforts that we have engaged. And I can name a few of them. We are signing MOUs with Ghana, with Nigeria. We have been talking to India, Philippines. We have advertised and have had over 100 applicants from the diaspora. We're expanding training. We have over 100 specialist nurses coming in the field by June in the in-house training that we have.
So you have things then in train to be able to, in the medium term, deal with this. But from 2023, we knew that the MOU had expired. Why did we not, in 2023, then put these things in place so that if we needed the additional support, or in the way that we're building out right now, we could have then worked this out?
Well, we have always been putting things in place because the Cuban contingent, as important as they are, was insufficient based on the gaps that we have in this space. So the Byrwin Scholarship is now 2 years running. It will go on for 3 more years. The adjustments in working conditions to make things more palatable for greater retention. The compensation review program to pay workers more.
Oh, so the Jamaica specific part is what you had been working on, making sure then that our medical professionals would be in a good place to take that to... Okay.
A big part of the challenge has been migration of our workers. And so we have worked on the retention strategy, which is the scholarship compensation review, some of the build-out that is taking place.
And I think that is important. Minister, I think that's important for you to come back inside Lead Story and talk to us about, because as we find out now about this gap, you're also talking to us about the work that your ministry would have done, work that perhaps many Jamaicans at home might not be aware of, as you now deal with the fallout from the Cubans now being called back home to Havana. Completely out of time though, Minister. Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, thank you so very much for joining us inside Lead Story. All right, we're going to take a break and come back to you here inside the show.
Jamaica, get ready. Something powerful is coming your way. Join internationally renowned speaker Prophet Kofi Danso, known for restoration, healing, and life transformation. This is more than a gathering, it's an encounter. If you're seeking clarity, hope, or a fresh start, this event is for you. March 11th and 12th, 7 p.m. nightly at the Olympia Crown Hotel, 53 Malnes Road, Kingston 10. Admission is free. One night can change everything.
Let's delve deep into the issues. We'll take you beneath the surface.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Orville Higgins, and it's another edition of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes. Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
Thanks so much for staying with us. This has been a week that has asked much of this nation. A sentencing that has forced us to examine how we protect women. A diplomatic decision that has forced us to examine what we owe to the people who have cared for us. But let's end with a little hope, even though it's going to be sad parts as well as we sum up the hardest moments of the week. And tonight, we end with some proof that this week, in 1,010 schools across the island, something quiet and consequential happened. Our students marked Peace Day. Not as a big airy-fairy idea, but not as a calendar observation either, but as a living commitment to the idea that the next generation of Jamaicans will know in their bones what it means to build rather than destroy. Let's take a look at Javoni Hamilton helping us understand what Peace Day looked like across Jamaica.
Under the theme for unity and non-violence, students parents and teachers from the St. Anne's Bay Infant School marched on Tuesday calling for an end to violence and for a more peaceful society. Principal Debbie Morris says the initiative reflects the school's commitment to nurturing positive values from an early age.
We have been teaching our little ones how to take turn, how to be kind to each other, all the things that will make them peaceful. And so we want them to come on the street now to say to other persons, listen, peace is what we need. Peace is what we really want in Jamaica now. We do not want the war. We want persons to live together as one and be a big family. That's what we are encouraging.
She adds that the march is not just symbolic, but a lesson on responsibility and community engagement for the students.
We want the children to know that their little voices are big on the street and persons will listen. And we are hoping that even one person today will say, okay, I heard some little children asking for peace, let me be peaceful.
Parents say their participation was a show of solidarity, reinforcing the importance of peace both at school and at home.
Peace actually begins at the home with the parent and the child, and for the school wanting to do something like this, it is a great initiative for me to partake in this peace march for my country and my child. So when I am here, my child will know that peace is what I stand for. So partnering with the school is a good thing for me.
Well, this gives me a great impact, greatness to excel, higher heights and deeper depths, that where unity, there is strength. So therefore, as a family, school family, we are indeed proud to stand together, stand with legacy that our generation, which is these babies coming up, to see that we are striving for excellence.
Reporting for CVM News, I am Giovanni Hamilton.
Striving for excellence, that was what you heard that parent say at the very end. This week, though, we also looked at the death of a child in the same parish of St. Anne. A 16-year-old now dead after an altercation at school. A 17-year-old now in police custody. And the horror that we have experienced this week wasn't just confined to St. Anne. We also saw viral videos of a fight of students in St. James at the Anchovy High School as well. But those are two schools. 1,000 of them this week celebrated peace. We just needed to get through every single corner of this country. Another lead story follow-up, this time about Dacia Forrester, because tonight a cloud of grief hangs over the community of Whithorn, Westmoreland, following the passing now of 42-year-old Dacia Forrester. She succumbed to her injuries this morning at the Cornwall Regional Hospital, 2 weeks after a horrific incident at a local gas station captured the nation's attention. For 17 days, Dacia fought for her life with third-degree burns covering 70% of her body. 30-year-old Colette Swaby received a stab wound as she was fighting with Dacia. But despite the desperate pleas from her family and a nationwide fundraising effort to airlift her to a specialized burn center in the United States, time finally ran out. We'll listen to a report by Curlin Brown as her mother made an impassioned plea to get the help that her daughter needed. Unfortunately, it is no longer possible.
Dacia Forrester lies incubated in hospital on a life support machine with stabilization of her internal organs, yet her third-degree burn wounds are deteriorating. Unknown to her, there are allegations and counter-allegations taking place online. While one of the three females pinned to the Fesco brawl is still unreachable in police lockup.
I have to get a lawyer to go to court, and the judge said if they do not charge me, they are to let me out by, I think it was 10 o'clock.
And so you were released?
Yes, I was released. And I had no choice. They said, you're free to go, Miss Forrester. They did not charge me.
That sigh of relief from Renisha Forrester, the burn victim's sister, speaking to CVM News exclusively.
So this time, this is a big girl in our eye. The girl, I thought, I'm the only girl who don't know one police side by side.
She was later transferred in handcuffs to a holding area at the Lucy station, but a statement was eventually taken from her in Negril last Sunday.
6 whole days and 5 nights, and it was nothing good. I didn't know if my sister died, I didn't know nothing. All I could think was whenever I shut me eye, my sister may have sick.
Our newsroom also heard from the gas station attendant's mother, who says she got the news while at a pharmacy.
When I see her, I even shocked more because she was bleeding from the face. And when I take her to the doctor, it was like, my God, I asked her, your eye blind? And he said, Mommy, I don't know.
Colette was reportedly injured during the fight between her and Dacia when things escalated at the gas station. However, our newsroom was told on January 27, also at the pump, both women had an argument after Dacia offered a $1,000 note to a male who was also a customer being attended to by Colette. She was reportedly giving him change in only $100 notes.
So it caused a problem right there, and the two of them catch up. She run go in her bag and take out scissors, run down my sister and the same gas pump to stab my sister with the scissors. And the same manager come out and call her.
The matter was reported to the police and to the gas station. It's unclear if she was suspended, but she was away from the gas station until recently, only for them to clash again after making eye contact. Renisha says she was trying to ease the tension with help from the manager who came out to serve Dacia, but they could not get them apart.
And they have if said she come with me to come beat her. Nothing like that. She went there to buy gas, and I said I come in with her. She going on.
Also, there are allegations, seeing that you mentioned social media, so people escalate it to say a man.
Oh my God, a man who my sister light himself off. By the way, what I am saying, what shocked me too, is when the girl go in her pocket and take out the blue light out. What are you doing on a gas pump with a lighter in your pocket? But clearly there are signs saying no smoking, no flame. What are you doing with a lighter in your pocket?
Amid all the negative voices, with only a little over $8,000 raised so far, the mother of the attacker is pleading for assistance and leniency.
Help her because it's another woman child. Reach out and help her if you can.
Curlin Brown, CVM News. Dacia
As the charges against the pump attendant are expected now to be upgraded following this morning's tragedy, we'll continue to keep you up to date as to what is taking place. That's it for today's edition of Lead Story. I'm Jolyan Silvera, and on behalf of the entire CVM production team, thank you for watching Lead Story. And if you watch it all week, kudos to you too. Have a fantastic evening, and I hope you stay safe. Up next, CVM News.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8